Yes, the hour is dark. Evil comes forth in the guise of good. Now we have no problem with administrative supervision, but we do have a desire to be independent of machine control and the Democratic Party patronage network.
Okay, family. Today we're going to be talking about Kamala Harris. As you know, she suspended her campaign earlier this week for the 2020 presidential nomination in the Democratic Party. And, you know, I just seem to think that she might have some black male issues, and she put up a good campaign in the beginning, but I just think she would have gone a lot farther if her husband would have been Uhuru na Nguvu.
No. You looking at a free black man.
Talk Black 360.
You want to know what a free black man look like? Look at me.
Uhuru na Nguvu. Welcome to another dose of Talk Black 360. I am your host, Tino Blaine King, the Kool-Aid and Kush, the pioneer of black pragmatism. Today we've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be talking about Senator Kamala Harris, who's just recently suspended her campaign for the 2020 presidential election. A few things that we're going to dig in. I want to try and be as fair as I could possibly be with the Queen, but as you've heard me say before, there is a difference in who we are as a part of this movement and African Americans. There is a difference. But anyway, let's get into this conversation about Kamala. Take a look at this video.
So here's the deal, guys. My campaign for president simply does not have the financial resources to continue and the financial resources we need to continue. I'm not a billionaire. I can't fund my own campaign. And as the campaign has gone on, it has become harder and harder to raise the money we need to compete. And I believe our campaign showed every child in America, regardless of their color or gender, that there are no limits to who can lead and hold positions of power in our country. And our campaign uniquely spoke to the experiences of black women and people of color and their importance to the success and the future of this party.
Okay, all right. So what's interesting is what Kamala said, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't want to disrespect the Queen in that way. She said it's like Kamala. Okay, so it's actually Kamala. All right, so what Kamala said in that clip, a few things. She started talking about her campaign and why she suspended her campaign. And one of the reasons was she said, well, I'm not a billionaire. And so these things are going to have to, be weighed out if we're going to be serious about the Black liberation movement, and we're not just going to go the route of trying to fit in to the American society, knowing that we're different, knowing that we've been left out for so many years that we can never catch up financially. These are the things that I think Kamala had to negotiate in her mind before she stepped on the stage to run for president. And I don't think she did that properly. She did not recognize enough, at least, the difference in her character. And you also heard in her suspension of her candidacy speech. Now, keep in mind, a speech like this is not just her getting in front of the camera and rattling off some information. Her and her aides will sit down and draft up a speech, and she's likely reading that speech from a teleprompter. So this was well thought out. She specifically said that she was going to continue to work for black women and people of color. Now, that's just a strange statement to me. So why do you isolate women from the black dynamic and then say people of color? So, for all intent and purposes, what she's just done is she's isolated the black male, and she's excluded the black male from her conversation. So I'm just going to say that there's some seed there for us to kind of grow from. But for right now, we're going to talk about her first part of that conversation where she said she's not a billionaire. And I want to go back to a conversation that she was having on the Breakfast Club before the announcement of her run for the presidency. And I want to show you how the reality of her perspective is confusing her, and her judgment is clouded and was clouded. This is what she said on the Breakfast Club.
I saw you talking about corporate donations.
Yeah.
And you said depends whether you would take them or not.
You know, I was asked, I did a town hall a couple weeks ago in California, and I was asked that question. And I wasn't expecting the question, and I thought about it afterwards. And I'm going to tell you, Charlamagne, I actually, I think that money has had such an outside influence on politics. And especially with the Supreme Court determining Citizens United, which basically means that big corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money influencing a campaign, right? We're all supposed to have an equal vote, but money has now really tipped the balance between an individual having equal power in an election to a corporation. So I've actually made a decision since I had that conversation that I'm not going to accept corporate PAC checks.
Wow.
I'm not.
So how you going to raise money for campaigns and stuff?
Well, you know, I've raised so far this year $3 million for my colleagues for the 2018 election cycle, and most of that money has been like in $18, $20 increments. People are turning out.
All right, so we're getting there. So what she said is, before she announced her presidency, this was a mindset that she had, and we've got to think about this. She didn't want to take corporate money. And I've heard a lot of the people on the Democratic side of the aisle, say that they didn't want corporate money. But Kamala, you're missing a reality point that just seems to be slipping away from you. There is a disproportionate wealth gap in this country. So if you're depending on a large African American base to support your campaign financially, then I think you're going to have some mathematical problems there, as you heard when she suspended her campaign. Not to say that she was expecting only black people to contribute to her campaign. However, you do have to recognize that if you are not going to at least acknowledge that you are black, then now we've got to wonder, what is it that makes you so outstanding that you're going to be, running for president? Like there was nothing great about your campaign. You spoke to no specific group of people. There were several other white females in the Democratic race that were running. That's a majority. So I'm just trying to figure out, where did she think her campaign was going to find an anchor? Who was going to be her base? And I go back to just thinking that by her not being able to fully embrace her blackness, she came across as pandering to black people, because her comments and her statements were seemingly disingenuous, whether they were or they weren't. And then there was other issues. A lot of people definitely took some deeply rooted concern with the fact that when she was Attorney General, she actually did things that were perceived to be anti-black. She wouldn't investigate police brutality in the city that she was in. So let's take a look at her responding to, I think it was a town hall with Jake Tapper, one of those CNN commentators. But let's take a look at that real quick.
When you were Attorney General, you opposed a legislation that would have required your office to investigate fatal shootings involving police officers. Why did you oppose that bill?
So I did not oppose the bill. I had a process when I was Attorney General of not weighing in on bills and initiatives because as Attorney General, I had a responsibility for writing the title and summary.
But you look at the website for the California Attorney General, and we found like 20 news releases or more where she was taking a position either in favor or against some kind of measure that was in the legislature. So it didn't add up to us, and we checked with them, and what they said was, okay, so she misheard Jake Tapper's question, and she gave a response that was not apt.
Again, I'm just going to say that some of the problem that she was having connecting to a base may have had something to do with her relationship in her life with black males. You know, I'm going to continue to say that because there's a lot of evidence that proves that to be the case. Now, remember, I'm a philosopher. A lot of these things that I'm analyzing and giving to you, some of them come from a philosophical perspective. Some of these assessments that I'm making are psychological investigations into the, thought process of the person. And I think that's necessary. Although it can't be proven from one instance, when you look at a body of work of a person, you can begin to attach that to a psychological profile. And with the case of her being Attorney General, we do know a lot of these police brutality cases were placed on black males. She had a problem trying to identify that as being a problem, so she wouldn't investigate the police department for their wrongdoings, or at least to find out if there was wrongdoings in these police brutality cases. And when challenged on it, basically she just lied. You'll find in a lot of her conversations, she has a problem talking about black issues, especially black male issues. But as you've also seen, she doesn't have a problem, speaking out in representation of black women. I do also think she was raised in a single parent family, although she does recognize her father, as being an intricate part of her life. But not having that black father present does weigh, on a person psychologically, especially on a black person. So let's continue to dig into this. And like I said, I want to be fair with the Queen. I absolutely do not feel like, she is out of the race because she was a worthy candidate and she was just beat out by corporate dollars. I think she had some issues with her, with her campaign. She didn't resonate with no one. She tried to be a very neutral candidate, and that's just not gonna work for black folks. Obama got away with it, but I don't think no one else is coming behind him being a neutral candidate and going to be able to muster the support of black voters, as well as and that goes for Cory Booker as well. But let's keep going, because I do have a connection with this sister. So let's find some more information here that's going to give us something to kind of go on. So take a look at this next clip.
Let me tell you, I am who I am today for two reasons: because of my mother and the family I was raised in, and Howard University and HBCU. But you and I know, when we walked onto that campus for the first time, we were surrounded by people that look like us. Fraternities. And what you learn at an HBCU is you do not have to fit into somebody's limited perspective on what it means to be young, gifted, and black. You can be all those things. When I was at Howard, I pledged a sorority. I was on the debate team. I was the chair of the Economic Society. And I went to my share parties too. And you didn't have to choose. You could be fully actualized. And there was such beauty to that, because this country still has such a limited view
of what it means for a person to be young and smart and black.
Okay, okay, you see when she gets personal, when she starts to introspect, then you see her blackness start to come through and her black experience start to come through. But still, in that scenario, you also find more seeds, more rooted issues that developed her as a character, and that has carried into her campaign. And one of the reasons why I believe her campaign was not as successful as she may have wanted it to be. So let's unpack this a little. Her foundational guidance, the things she said that made her who she is, was her mother and the fact that she went to an HBCU. So the mother, of course, is Indian, but and I don't want to be incorrect in saying that. I believe the mother is Indian. I know she's an immigrant. So I'm going to go and not Native American Indian. We'll talk about Far East Indian. But mother's Indian, father was Jamaican. But at this point, she's not giving any credit to her father. I don't know if if they split or if he passed away. I didn't find that information out, but it'd be easy to find out if you wanted to know. But however, she's pointing to the foundational concept of her character. And it was the influence of her mother, who she said in her announcement speech that her mother was an activist of sort, but a civil rights activist, meaning that they went out and civil rights was about black people at the time. But there was this thing, kind of on the backside of that civil rights conversation that made it about all people. When we know that the specifics of that was black people. But nonetheless, that's what we're dealing with. And not to mention, let's go back a little bit more. So look, Kamala is a mixed race female in the 80s. Light skin, good hair. Look, the colorism was a thing in the 80s. I mean, let's be honest. Light-skinned women got preferred treatment in the 80s. I mean, you had people like Jasmine Guy. What's the other sister's name from the Cosby Show? You know what? I wrote this down earlier because I knew it was going to come up as something that I wanted to mention. Lisa Bonet. That was it. Lisa Bonet and Albie Shore. So guess what? She's at this HBCU and she's a light-skinned, mixed-race female. And she talked about all of the things that she was involved in. And guess what? She got preferential treatment. So let's figure this out. You're coming through your formative years with preferential treatment, being able to excel, getting advantage because colorism was a thing. And now you find it difficult to say that black people have an issue because you're starting to feel like, well, if I did it, everybody can do it. And that's one of the problems that we have when black people who aren't connected to pro-black activities try to speak about pro-black activities, especially when you're going home to someone who is not going to champion that idea. And look, God, I don't have any problem with interracial relationships. I'm consistent on this point. You can love whoever you want to love. That's not a problem. However, it is going to cloud your judgment if you're speaking about pro-black issues, because the love that you have for that person is not going to allow you to attack their character. And the reality of it is her husband represents everything that is oppressive in America. He is a white male. I mean, let's just be honest. That's what it is. The country is based around the needs and desires of rich white men. So how do you make a statement in a pro-black position when you're going home to a rich white man? It's a difficult task to accomplish. And I'm just saying this all kind of factors into the mindset and the psyche that made it very complicated for Kamala Harris to be able to run a campaign as a black woman. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at this next clip and you'll see how she has challenges answering things such as reparations.
They stand on some form of reparations for black people. Did you see Mayor de Blasio saying the marijuana economy could be a form of reparations? Marianne Williamson says black people should get $100 billion in slavery reparations. Like, where do you stand on it?
Well, look, I think that we have got to address that. Again, it's back to the inequities. Look, America has a history of 200 years of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
We had Jim Crow. We had legal segregation in America.
Okay, so what's the problem? You get it. Like, you understand what I'm saying here? She's getting it. It's in her. But she's conflicted because as much as she recognizes that, you see that in this particular subject, she is very cautious of the words that she used and her implications, or at least an unwillingness to implicate rich white men as causation to these problems. And look, it's an easy situation. Where do you stand on reparations? I'm for it. It's not a very complicated answer. It's not something that you need to talk about the obvious. We know there was slavery. We know there was Jim Crow. But what about reparations? How are we going to fix it? And she goes on in that conversation to just basically recap history without giving any definitive answer to reparations. And that's an uncomfortable space for her. And to black voters, that comes across as disingenuous. Simple as that. So let's take a look at this last clip, and it kind of, consolidates the scenario that I'm talking about. She was brought up in a capsule, so to speak, and now that she feels like, if I can do it, everybody can do it, that's problematic. But we'll talk about that right after the clip. Let's take a look.
Because this country still has such a limited view of what it means for a person to be young and smart and black. And so at those years when you're learning your identity, to be in that environment where basically everybody just says to you, you can be whatever you want to be. And by the way, and if you don't, it's because you need to work harder, right? Because that's the other thing that happens. You can't walk away and say, oh, it's because of my skin color that I didn't get that. Nope.
Right.
Nope. That's not it.
All right. So as you can see, my claims are not unfounded. There's a couple things in that clip. As she was saying, growing up, or at least coming through her college years in the HBCU, being amongst other blacks in that specific situation, you couldn't blame your color, or you couldn't blame your lack of success in that environment on color. But then you come out of that environment, which of course there still was colorism inside of that environment in the 80s at the HBCU, definitely. But for those of you who didn't see School Days, go take a look. But you come out of that environment, and then you bring that into what I'm calling the real world. It's even though the world is institutionalized, the college environment is even more so institutionalized. So you're living in a bubble in those college years, and she's acknowledged that America still has complications recognizing the value of black life, recognizing the problems that America has caused that America has not yet made an attempt to repair. An attempt to make black people equal is foolish. There is still a wealth gap in America. The wealth gap in an economy and in a society where everything is based on money and monetary funds, then you can't look at anything in a bubble. Everything is tied to money. And the 400 years of oppression that black people suffered is tied to today, and it's continuing to suffer because of this wealth gap. White people own 99% of the wealth in America. So black people, whenever you look at any specific situation, you don't have much of a chance. If there's an equation there, out of 100 people that's going to make it, 80% of those people are going to be white, and some remaining percentage of that 20% is going to be black. So those few blacks that make it, that say, I did it, why can't you, are really not taking a total look at the situation that we face in America. I wanted to try and be as fair as I could be for Kamala Harris. I know if she sees this, she's probably not going to think that I was all that fair. But I love the Queen. I wish her all the luck in the world. I hope that we understand that a lot of times we have to separate ourselves in some sense from the mentality that a lot of these still civil rights based blacks are portraying in society, because they'll tell you that, oh, you can be anything that you want to be, and but you're not taking into account that there's a much different path for blacks, especially black males, when it comes to society and advancement. But with that, I want to make sure that I have gotten that point across. The Sisters campaign, had a couple issues. She didn't connect with any base. She had no anchoring in her campaign, and she had a very false sense of reality when it came to money. $18, $20 from your colleagues is going to run out, and if your colleagues and your base is black, is definitely going to run out. So I hope I did a good service to you guys, and you got an understanding of where we should be on this situation. If you're a voter, that's some more information for you. Myself personally, I'm not a voter. I will be the very first day that a candidate comes out and speaks to a black agenda. I'll become a voter again, as long as we can validate what they're saying is not just pandering. But with that, look, you know what you got to do till the next episode. Just stay strong and stay black. Ashe? This has been another dose of Talk Black 360.
No. You will never be enslaved again by no man.